My sister called me a gold digger at our father's funeral. She didn't whisper it. She didn't say it in private. She stood beside Dad's coffin, looked directly at me, and said it loud enough for everyone in the front 3 rows to hear. You're only here because you want his money. For a moment, I thought I'd misunderstood her. The church was silent. My mother was sitting beside me. My husband had his hand on my shoulder, and my father's closest friends were standing near the coffin. I looked at Sarah. What did you just say? She folded her arms. You heard me. Sarah, you haven't visited Dad in months. That isn't true. You came twice. I came almost every weekend. She laughed. Sure you did. My face burned. Then she said the sentence that I still remember, word for word. You weren't there for him when he was alive. Don't pretend you care now that he's dead. I couldn't answer. I was too shocked. Then someone behind us stood up. It was Dad's best friend. His name was Robert. He was 76 years old. He had known my father since they were teenagers. He walked slowly toward the front. Everyone turned to look at him. Robert stopped beside me. Then he looked at Sarah and said, That is enough? Sarah stared at him. Robert's voice shook with anger. Your father asked me to tell everyone the truth if this ever happened. I felt my stomach drop. What truth? Sarah asked. Robert looked at me. Then he said, Your sister was the one who was taking care of your father when nobody else knew he needed help. The room went completely silent. Then Robert reached inside his jacket and pulled out a small envelope. My name is Emily. I'm 39 years old. My sister Sarah is 42. Our father, Michael, died at 79 after a long battle with heart disease. He wasn't a famous man. He wasn't a politician. He wasn't someone whose death made the news. He was just Dad. He owned a construction company. He had a house he lived in for 30 years. He had a small cabin near the lake. He had savings, investments, property, enough money that when he died, everyone knew there would be an inheritance. That was the part I hated, because Dad's death immediately became about money. Not for me. I didn't care about the money, but other people did, especially Sarah. Sarah and I had never been close. We weren't enemies. We simply grew up differently. Sarah was competitive. I wasn't. Sarah liked being in charge. I avoided confrontation. Sarah remembered every disagreement. I usually forgot them. Dad used to say, Sarah could negotiate with a parking meter. She'd laugh. I would say, and Emily would probably apologize to the parking meter. Dad would laugh harder. It was our family joke. But somewhere along the way, Sarah stopped treating it like a joke. She started believing I was weak, that I was irresponsible, that I couldn't handle money, that I didn't understand Dad's business. She wasn't completely wrong. I wasn't interested in business. I didn't know much about investments, and I had never wanted to. I had my own career, my own family, my own life. Dad respected that. Sarah didn't. When Dad got sick, everything changed. His heart condition had been getting worse for years, but he refused to slow down. He still went to the office, still checked on employees, still repaired things around the house, still insisted he could climb the stairs without help. Then one winter morning, he collapsed in the kitchen. The ambulance came. He survived. But after that, the doctor told him something he didn't want to hear. He couldn't live alone anymore. Dad hated that idea. He told the doctor, I've been living alone for 20 years. The doctor said, You haven't had this heart condition for 20 years. Dad laughed. That's because I wasn't old enough to know better. The doctor didn't laugh. Neither did we. Sarah immediately volunteered to move in with him. She was closer. She worked remotely. She said it made sense. I lived almost 2 hours away. I had a husband, 2 children, a full-time job. I couldn't simply move in. So Sarah became the person everyone saw. She took Dad to appointments. She picked up prescriptions. She managed his bills. She cooked for him. She stayed overnight. I visited every weekend, sometimes twice a week. I called every night. Dad and I talked for hours, but nobody saw those calls. Nobody saw the grocery deliveries I ordered. Nobody saw the medical bills I paid when Dad forgot. Nobody saw the nights I stayed awake because I was worried about him. Sarah was physically there. I was emotionally and financially involved from a distance. And somehow, that difference became the story Sarah told everyone. 3 months before Dad died, I visited him on a Saturday. He was sitting on the porch. He looked tired. I sat beside him. You okay? I'm fine. You're lying, he smiled. You always know. Because you're a terrible liar. He laughed. Then he became serious. Emily, I need to ask you something. What? If Sarah tells you something about me after I'm gone, don't automatically believe her. I looked at him. Why would you say that? Because your sister thinks she knows what I want. Doesn't she? No. He looked toward the yard. She knows what she thinks I want. I didn't understand. Dad, is something wrong? He shook his head. Just promise me. Promise what? That you won't fight with her over money. I laughed. I don't want your money. I laughed. I don't want your money. I know. Then why are you worried? Because money changes people. I said, not me. Dad looked at me. That's what I hope. That was the last serious conversation we ever had. 2 weeks later, Dad died. It happened at home. Sarah was there. I was driving to work when she called. I answered. Sarah? She was crying. Emily, what happened? Dad's gone. I pulled the car over. I couldn't understand the words. What? He stopped breathing. Did you call the ambulance? Yes. What did they say? She started crying harder. They couldn't save him. I sat there on the side of the road. Cars passed. People went to work. The world kept moving, and my father was gone. The funeral was 4 days later. I spent the morning helping Mom. She could barely stand. Sarah was everywhere, talking to the funeral director, greeting relatives, checking flowers, answering questions. She looked exhausted, but she also looked in control. I remember thinking, she's holding everything together. I was grateful. I didn't know that by the afternoon, she'd accuse me of being a gold digger. The church was full. Dad had a lot of friends. Employees came, neighbors, people he'd helped over the years. There were at least 100 people. I sat beside Mom. Sarah sat on the other side. The service began. There were readings, music, a slideshow. Then the pastor invited family members to speak. Sarah stood first. She walked to the podium. She talked about Dad's work ethic, his stubbornness, his love of fishing. She told a funny story about him getting stuck in a snowstorm. People laughed. Then she talked about how she'd cared for him during his final year. She started crying. Everyone looked at her sympathetically. Then she said, I was there every day. She paused. I watched him become weaker. Then she looked directly at me, and some people weren't. I felt my stomach tighten. Sarah continued. Some people only showed up when there was something to gain. I stared at her. Mom whispered, Sarah, stop. But she didn't. She said Dad knew who really cared about him. Then she looked at me again. And I think everyone deserves to know that. I stood up. That's enough. Sarah turned toward me. You want to tell them? Yes. Go ahead. I couldn't believe her. You're doing this at Dad's funeral. You're the one who came here pretending. Pretending what? That you were his devoted daughter. My voice shook. I visited him every weekend. You left. I had children. You chose your family over Dad. He was my family. Sarah laughed. You sent him groceries. I called him every night. You couldn't even stay overnight. I had work. Exactly. Then she said it. You're a gold digger. The words echoed through the church. Someone gasped. Mom covered her face. My husband stood up. But before he could say anything, Robert rose from the third row. Robert had been Dad's best friend for more than 50 years. They met when they were teenagers. They worked together briefly. They built houses together. They went fishing together. They had traveled together. Robert had known Dad longer than either of us had been alive. He walked slowly toward the front. He didn't look at me. He looked at Sarah. Then he said, that is enough. Sarah stared at him. Robert, stay out of this. He shook his head. No, it's a family matter. Your father made it my matter. What are you talking about? Robert reached inside his jacket. He pulled out a small envelope. It was old, creased, sealed. My name was written across the front. Emily. I stared at it. What is that? Robert said, your father gave it to me 2 weeks before he died. Sarah's face changed. What? Robert continued. He told me not to give it to you unless someone accused you of abandoning him. The church became completely silent. Then Robert looked at Sarah. And now someone has. Sarah looked shocked. Dad never gave you anything. Robert almost smiled. He gave me something very important. What? The truth. He turned toward the audience. Your father was proud of both his daughters. Sarah crossed her arms. That isn't what he told me, Robert said. Then he lied to you. She looked furious. Robert continued. Your father knew Emily was being accused of not caring. I felt tears forming. He knew she couldn't be here every day. He knew she had children. He knew she had a job. And he knew exactly how much she did for him. Sarah shook her head. That's not true. Robert looked at her. I was there. Then Robert told everyone what I had never known. 6 months earlier, Dad had asked him to help with something. Dad was having trouble managing his medications. He was forgetting appointments. He was missing bills. He was afraid Sarah would worry if he admitted how bad things had become. So he asked Robert to help. Robert started visiting twice a week. He organized Dad's medications. He checked his mail. He helped him pay bills. And he discovered something. Dad had been hiding how much he relied on me, not because he didn't trust Sarah, because he didn't want Sarah to feel like she was failing. Robert said, "Your father told me that Emily called every night." Sarah looked at me. He told me she paid his medical bills. Sarah's face went pale. He told me she arranged his medication deliveries. I couldn't speak. He told me she was the one who found the specialist, who eventually treated him. Sarah shook her head. No. Robert continued. And he told me that every time Emily came to visit, she cleaned the house before she left, because she didn't want him to know she was worried. Mom started crying. Sarah looked at me. "Why didn't you tell me?" I whispered. "You never asked." Robert held out the envelope. I took it. My hands were shaking. "Open it," he said. I looked at Sarah. Then Mom. Then my husband. Finally, I opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. Dad's handwriting. I recognized it immediately. The first line said, "Emily, if Robert is giving you this, then something happened that I hoped wouldn't." I couldn't continue. I wiped my eyes. Then read, "Someone has probably told you that you weren't there for me." I looked up. Sarah was crying. I kept reading. "Don't believe them. I know exactly what you did. I know about the phone calls. I know about the bills. I know about the doctor. I know about the groceries. I know you drove 2 hours every weekend, even when you were exhausted." I started crying. Then came the sentence that broke me. "You never once asked me what you would receive when I died." I covered my mouth. Dad continued, "Sarah is going to think I trusted her more because she was physically here. That isn't true. I trusted her with my daily life. I trusted you with my private worries. Both kinds of trust matter. Then, if you are being accused of wanting my money, remember this. I know you never asked for it, and I know you would give it away if it meant keeping the family together." I had to stop. I couldn't see the page through my tears. Robert put his hand on my shoulder. Then I read the final paragraph. "Don't fight Sarah. She's scared. She thinks losing me means losing everything. Remind her that she hasn't lost you. She still has a sister." I folded the letter. I couldn't speak. Sarah walked toward me. For several seconds, she didn't say anything. Then she whispered, "I didn't know." I looked at her. "I know." I thought. She stopped. "I thought Dad told me everything." "He didn't." "I thought you didn't care." "I cared. I thought you wanted the inheritance." "I didn't." She started crying. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't know you thought that." She looked down. I was angry. "Why?" "Because Dad depended on you." I was confused. "What?" She wiped her face. "He called you when he was scared." "I didn't know that." Sarah continued. "He asked you questions he never asked me." "Like what?" "Whether he was a burden." I felt my chest tighten. "He asked me that too." She shook her head. "No." She looked at me. "He told me he didn't want to worry me." That's when I realized what had happened. Sarah had been caring for Dad physically. I had been caring for him emotionally, and neither of us knew the full picture. We had each been seeing only half of our father's final year. Sarah saw the appointments, the medications, the meals, the sleepless nights. I saw the phone calls, the fears, the questions, the moments Dad didn't want anyone else to see. And instead of combining those two versions of his life, we had turned them into a competition. Who cared more? Who sacrificed more? Who was the better daughter? Dad had tried to stop it. We hadn't listened. After the funeral, Robert asked me to stay behind. Everyone else left. Sarah sat alone in the front row. Mom was with relatives. Robert looked at me. "There is one more thing." "What?" He pulled out another envelope. I stared at it. "Dad left this too." "Why?" "I don't know." "What does it say?" This time, it had Sarah's name. "Sarah." She looked up. "What is that?" Robert said, "Your father wanted you to have it." Sarah took it. Her hands were shaking. She opened it. Her eyes moved across the page. Then she started crying. "What does it say?" I asked. She handed it to me. I didn't want to read her private letter, but she said, "Please." I looked down. Dad had written, "Sarah, you are going to think you failed me. You didn't. You took care of me when I needed someone nearby. You were there when I fell. You were there when I couldn't sleep. You were there when I couldn't sleep. You were there when I was afraid. I could never repay you for that." Sarah was sobbing. Then I saw the next line. "But taking care of me does not give you the right to decide who loved me more." I looked at her. She nodded. "Keep reading. Your sister loves differently than you do." She doesn't fight. She doesn't demand attention. She doesn't tell people what she has done. That doesn't mean she has done less. It means you don't always see it. Then, you are both going to be angry with each other after I'm gone. Please don't make my death the reason you lose your sister. Sarah covered her face. The final sentence said, if you call her a gold digger, you will be saying the exact opposite of what I know to be true. Sarah began crying harder. She whispered, I did exactly what he told me not to do. I said, you were grieving. That isn't an excuse. No. She looked at me. But it's a reason. The next morning, Sarah called me. Can you come over? I almost said no. Then I remembered Dad's letter. I drove to her house. She was sitting at the kitchen table. There were papers everywhere, the will, bank statements, medical bills, property documents. She looked exhausted. I found something. What? She pushed a folder toward me. It was a list of Dad's medical expenses. Next to several payments was my name. Sarah looked at me. You paid these? Yes. Why didn't you tell me? Because Dad asked me not to. She stared at me. Why? He didn't want you to think he was becoming a burden. She closed her eyes. I thought you were hiding money. I was hiding medical bills. She laughed bitterly. I've spent months thinking you were trying to get more than me. I never cared. You didn't? No. She looked at me. Then why did you ask Thomas about the will? Because Dad told me he had changed it. Sarah frowned. When? A few months before he died. What did he change? I don't know. She stared at me. You really don't? No. She stared at me. You really don't? No. We called Thomas. He came over that afternoon. He brought the final will. Sarah and I sat beside each other. Thomas explained everything. Dad had not left the majority of his estate to either daughter. Instead, he had created a structure. The house would remain available to Mom. The company would remain under employee ownership. The lake cabin would go to Sarah. A portion of the investments would go to me. Another portion would go to Sarah, and a significant amount would be placed into a family charitable fund. Sarah looked at me. You knew? No. Thomas smiled. Your father wanted both of you to think you were getting less. Why? Because he knew neither of you needed more. That sounded like Dad, Thomas continued. He told me that if either of you fought over the inheritance, he'd failed. Sarah laughed through her tears. That sounds like him. Then Thomas gave us one more document. A letter from Dad. This one was addressed to both of us. We opened it together. It began, my girls. That was what Dad always called us. Not Sarah. Not Emily. My girls. We read together. If you're reading this, then I am no longer there to interrupt your arguments. Sarah laughed. I laughed too. Then, so I need you to listen. You are not competing for my love. You never were. I loved Sarah for the woman who stayed when things were difficult. I loved Emily for the woman who crossed 2 hours of highway because she heard my voice sounded tired. I loved Sarah for making sure I took my medicine. I loved Emily for making sure I didn't feel like a burden. I loved Sarah's strength. I loved Emily's kindness. Neither cancels the other. Sarah reached for my hand. I took it. The letter continued. If money becomes the reason you stop speaking, then give it away. We both laughed. I'm serious. Money is replaceable. Your sister isn't. Then, Sarah, stop trying to prove you're responsible. Emily, stop trying to prove you're easy to love. I froze. That sentence hit me harder than anything else. Because Dad had always known something I hadn't admitted to myself. I spent my whole life trying not to be difficult, trying not to need too much, trying not to ask for anything. Sarah spent her life proving she could handle everything. We were both doing the same thing, trying to earn love we already had. Dad's final words were, I hope when you remember me, you don't remember the hospital. Remember the porch. Remember the fishing trips. Remember the terrible coffee. Remember your mother laughing when I tried to fix the dishwasher. Remember being sisters before you were adults. And if you ever forget what I wanted, remember this. Take care of each other. That was it. No dramatic inheritance reveal. No secret fortune. No final command. Just Dad asking his daughters to stop competing. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then Sarah said, I owe you an apology. I looked at her. You do? She smiled weakly. I didn't expect you to agree that quickly. You called me a gold digger at Dad's funeral. I know. You probably owe me several apologies. She laughed. Fair. Then she became serious. I was jealous. Of me? Yes. Why? Because Dad trusted you with things he didn't trust me with. I shook my head. He trusted you with things he didn't trust me with. What? His care. She looked down. I thought that meant I was the favorite. I thought it meant I wasn't. We both laughed. Then we cried, because we finally understood. A few weeks later, we went through Dad's house together. There were boxes everywhere. Old photographs, fishing equipment, business documents, tools, clothes. Things neither of us wanted to throw away. We found an old photograph of the three of us. Sarah was about 12. I was 9. Dad had his arms around both of us. We were standing beside the lake. Sarah looked at it. Remember that day? I smiled. You pushed me into the water. You deserved it. I was 9. You stole my fishing rod. I thought it was mine. Dad was laughing in the photograph. We stood there for a long time. Then Sarah said, I don't want us to become strangers. We won't. Promise? Promise. Months passed. The inheritance was settled. The company continued. Mom moved into the house. Sarah kept the cabin. I kept the letter. Robert kept his promise. And our relationship changed, not overnight. There were still arguments. There were still old wounds. But whenever one of us started comparing what we had done for Dad, we stopped, because we knew where that road ended. It ended with 2 sisters standing at their father's funeral, fighting over who had loved him more. We didn't want to go there again. 1 year later, we held a small gathering at Dad's favorite lake. His closest friends came. Some former employees, family. Robert stood beside the water. He raised a glass. To Michael, everyone raised theirs. Then Sarah looked at me. Do you remember what Robert said at the funeral? I smiled. Which part? That I cared for Dad. You did, and that you did too. You did. She shook her head. No. She looked at the water. I used to think those things were separate. What do you think now? They were the same thing. How? We were both taking care of him. She smiled. You just did it from farther away. I smiled back. Exactly. That evening, Sarah gave me something. A copy of Dad's first letter, the one Robert had brought to the funeral. I made a copy. Why? So we both have it. I looked at the page. At the top, Emily. Then Sarah said, I think Dad wanted you to have it. I have the original. I know. Then why the copy? She smiled. Because I need it too. I understood. The letter wasn't just for me. It was proof that Dad had seen us both, even when we couldn't see each other. People sometimes ask what happened to the inheritance. That's not the important part. The house stayed in the family. The company stayed independent. The cabin became a place where our children spend summers. The charitable fund helps dozens of students. Dad's money did good things, but none of that was what changed my life. What changed my life was standing in that church and hearing my sister call me a gold digger. Because for a few horrible minutes, I believed her. I wasn't if everyone thought I had abandoned Dad. I wondered if maybe I hadn't done enough. I wondered if all those phone calls and drives and payments had meant anything. Then Robert stood up. He told the truth, and Dad's letter proved something I desperately needed to hear. He knew everything. Every call, every drive, every bill, every quiet thing I had done because I loved him. I hadn't needed to announce it. I hadn't needed to prove it. Dad already knew. I still keep the original letter in a box. Sometimes I read it. Especially the line, you never once asked me what you would receive when I died. That sentence reminds me of something important. People can judge what they see. They can misunderstand what they don't see. They can create stories based on incomplete information. But the person who lived your reality knows the truth. Dad knew mine, and that's enough. As for Sarah, she never called me a gold digger again, but she did something better. She started telling people the truth. She tells them I was there. That I called Dad every night. That I drove 2 hours every weekend, that I paid bills, that I helped him find his specialist, and whenever someone says, you must have wanted the inheritance, Sarah answers, she never asked for it. Then she adds, she just wanted Dad. That sentence means more to me than any money he left behind. Robert is still alive. He still visits us. Every Christmas, he tells the same stories about Dad. The fishing trip where Dad fell into the lake, the road trip where they got lost for 6 hours, the time Dad tried to fix a broken engine with duct tape. We laugh every time. Robert always ends with the same sentence. Your father was stubborn. Sarah says, very. I say, extremely. Then Robert smiles. But he was usually right. I think about the letter. I think about the funeral. I think about my sister's accusation. And I realize he was right about the most important thing. Family isn't measured by who was standing closest. It isn't measured by who sacrificed the most. and it certainly isn't measured by who gets the larger piece of an inheritance. Love doesn't keep score. People do. Dad never did. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Robert hadn't stood up. Maybe I would have stayed silent. Maybe Sarah's words would have become the story everyone remembered. Maybe the family would have divided. Maybe we would have fought over the estate. Maybe Dad's final wish would have been forgotten. But Robert stood. He didn't let grief become a weapon. He didn't let one accusation become the truth. He remembered what Dad asked him to do. Tell the truth. That's all. Sometimes that's the hardest thing. The last time Sarah and I visited Dad's grave, we stood there together. She brought flowers. I brought the letter. We didn't say much. Then Sarah looked at me. Do you think he knew we'd be okay? I smiled. Yes. How? Because he planned for us to fight? She laughed. That sounds terrible. It does. But he did. But he did. He knew us. But he did. He knew us. She looked at the headstone. Then she said, I miss him. So do I. We stood there, two sisters. No competition. No inheritance. No accusations. Just two daughters who finally understood what their father had been trying to teach them. Dad didn't leave me a fortune. He left me something better. He left me proof. Proof that the quiet things matter. Proof that love doesn't always look dramatic. Proof that showing up can mean more than standing in the same room. And proof that sometimes, when someone tells your story incorrectly, the truth has a way of standing up. At Dad's funeral, my sister called me a gold digger. She thought she was telling everyone who I was. She wasn't. She was telling everyone how hurt she was. Robert understood that. Dad understood it too. And before he died, Dad made sure someone would be there to remind us. Not who got what. Not who sacrificed more. Not who was the better daughter. Just the truth. We both loved him. We both took care of him. We both thought the other one didn't. And in the end, Dad left us the one inheritance neither of us expected. A reason to forgive each other. A reason to stop keeping score. And a reason to remember that being family isn't about proving who loves the most. It's about being there when it matters. Even when nobody else sees it. Even when nobody thanks you. Even when the person you love isn't there to say they noticed. Dad noticed. He always did. And that's the truth I will carry with me for the rest of my life.